Tonia here, your host of the Alchemy of Me, where we navigate the anatomy of humanity through the lens of science and spirituality. Let's unearth the layers and unravel the systems in place that dim who we are and how we live and experience life. On this journey together, we'll weave in an eclectic blend of mind, body, energy, medicine, concepts, tools, and practices that'll nourish the seeds, the fire, that gold of intelligence that is you. This is an opportunity, your opportunity to reclaim, to rediscover, to transform, to alchemize you. The Alchemy of Me show starts now.
Hello, hello. Tonia here, your host of the Alchemy of Me, where we navigate the anatomy of humanity through the lens of science and spirituality. And I am beyond excited to be joined by Mark Divine today. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, yeah. Yes. It is. It's. There's so many ways. I just want to say thank you and joining me on this journey, and a journey that's been going, that I feel like I've been connected with you for a long time. And I'm excited for that to kind of shine through today as we kind of weave this magic. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So before we jump in, I just want to give the audience a little bit of a background on you. I don't think my background will do it justice because you've done so many things, and you've really made an impact on so many people's lives. But in summary, Mark, you founded SEALFIT, Unbeatable Mind, and the Mark Divine Courage Foundation for veterans suffering from PTS. Mark is also a retired Navy SEAL commander, New York Times bestselling author, coach to elite performers, and host of the Mark Divine Show. Mark's mission is to train 100 million visionaries to lead with compassion and courage. And I do know that your most recent book, Uncommon, which we're going to dive into a little bit today, it's reached a bestseller for Amazon. I mean, it's just been out for a couple weeks now, right? Or maybe less than a month.
It came out on July 15th, so less than a month.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And then I'm going to try. So Way of the Seal, that was the first one I read many, many years ago. We have Unbeatable Mind. And then Staring Down the Wolf. Is that?
That's
did
right.
I get it?
Staring Down the Wolf. Good memory. Wow.
Okay. And then I know Kokoro yoga, and there's a SEALFIT one about
8 weeks to SEALFIT, right? Which is the training gospel for hardcore warrior athletes.
Yes, which totally resonated with me when I was first starting to kind of embody this way of being here in this way. So, is there anything else? I mean, I kind of just
that's
yeah.
It's all just story, anyways, isn't it, Tonya?
It is, but
there's just artifacts of the storyline, that you could call this life.
Yeah, but
I don't hang too much. I don't hang my ego on them.
There's the you're not attached.
Not attached.
Yeah.
I really believe these things come through us, no matter whether you think you're the author or the creator or the whatever. You're just the instrument. And so the sooner you can reckon with that, then the happier you're going to be, because then the burden is gone, right? The burden of attachment, the burden of expectation, the burden of having to be perfect, or the next thing. The next thing may or may not come. Like, I don't know if I'm going to write another book, but if I'm inspired and another one comes out of me, then that's great.
Well,
Way woo way. Action without the actor.
Oh, which goes with, I mean, you're the vessel, you're receiving,
That's right.
you're open to it. I mean, that's the part, right?
That's right. And essentially that's what spiritual practice is all about, is removing the obstacles to be open to receiving the gifts, right? Which are everyone's gifts, but then they'll be expressed in a unique way through every individual based upon the conditioning and the, the archetypal energy of that human.
I love that. And it reminds me, so I have to bring this in I'm thinking back to some of our interactions many years ago when I was in a very commonplace, and I thought, the ego was very happy with where I was. I had the corporate job, everything was wonderful, from the outside, but inside, man, it was a shit show. And I've
been there.
Yeah. And I think that, through all of your, the shares over the years, in your most recent book and in past books. And then, I attended one of your, I think it was Unbeatable Mind Summit.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And it was incredible. Incredible. And I just want to mention, like, there's these moments of time where I feel like things you've said, they're words, but words with authority, because they're coming from a place that, like you said, there's no attachment. So I remember when you made that declaration of your mission to train 100 million visionaries to lead with compassion and courage. And I was like, oh my God, Mark has gone absolutely crazy. Like that was my ego was like, I can't believe how wild,
You know what? The funny thing is, of course, my ego was like, what the heck are you saying right now? Right. And, but if something is declared, right, especially if it's coming from source,
yes,
you can't not do it. Now I have, just like we used to say in the sales, no plan survives contact. So I don't have a plan for how that's going to happen. I have zero idea. And some people tell me it's already happened. Yeah. Because the way I define that is really train and inspire, right? Impact. And, someone could like literally steal all of my Unbeatable Mind content and deliver it to 50 million people. And I'm like, good, 50% of the way there.
Perfect.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're all instruments to try to tip the balance, against the negativity in the world. So it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And so I look at that as, if I have thousands of coaches who then train and inspire thousands of other coaches over the next 10, 15 years, you know what I mean? And we have coaches in 50 different countries already. Stuff ripples out, and then it picks up speed. And truth finds a way, right, to disseminate where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. So I imagine, half of those people won't have any clue who Mark Divine is, and that does not matter one bit.
And I
look at that,
love that, though.
Yeah, they bring their kind of linear mind to the equation, and they're like, well, how are you going to be in front of 100 million people? And I'm like, well, it can be done, because I think Tony Robbins could probably make that claim. Mm-hmm. Maybe not like standing in front of him, but he has definitely stood in front of tens of millions. So, but I don't have Tony's energy. I'm not that kind of guy, right? I'm more like you, like a horse whisperer. Like I speak truth, but I don't need to motivate an ego to go be more of an ego. And I'm kind of the anti that. Anyways,
I love that, because it's truth. And when we're aligned and when we're in our truth and we're coming from that place, we are aligned with source and we are aligned with love. Right. And it's coming from a place of love, which to me is what that mission is, that compassion and courage, right? That's love. So it's not leading from your head, it's leading from a place of courage and compassion, which is coming from your heart and connected with something so much bigger. And so that's where I love too what you said about just the, again, it goes back to not being attached, because if you were, you would be going after people. It's not about that, because it's about you being here in your way, owning that. And I remember, it's funny because I get these little, as you were describing that, as like the horse whisperer, and he's like, yes, that resonates. And that's why I think you've always, you kind of always been in the background for me, because I would see you in the gym where there's so much, we're doing a CrossFit workout and I'm just like, my body is like, hands are completely ripped up. I'm doing my best. And that's, in that moment, and you're over in the corner, just in a complete state of, bliss, because you're meditating, even though there's so much chaos going on around you. And I'll never forget that. And just to kind of bring into like the, what your declaration after I had the, like, I can't believe he just said 100 million people, what you did in that moment. I'm sure I am one of many people. I realized in me that I'm not reaching my full potential.
Right.
And
flying full out. Right.
Yeah. It's like, wait a second. Mark has it, in my, where I was at that moment, Mark has it all figured out. And he's going bigger, much bigger. And I was like, okay, we're going to shake it up a bit.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's as you evolve, right? You kind of settle in, right? We know this from evolutionary psychology or developmental psychology, right? You kind of settle in at different stages, and each stage has its own kind of energy, consciousness level. This also relates to David Hawkins' power versus force scale of consciousness. And you'll kind of settle in, and some people then that's it. That's their new normal, and that's where they stay. But if you're on a quest, right? If you're deeply committed to growth or your own evolution, that evolutionary impulse never stops, right? And so you might find yourself at a plateau, and I address that in my book, Staring Down the Wolf, what we call the 5 plateaus. But then very quickly, and you might rejoice in the fact that you've transcended and included, and you have a greater perspective and more awareness. But very quickly, the urge, right, the sense that this is still limiting, right, will come upon you. And so then it becomes motivating to continue your practice and your journey. And I think what happens when you have those moments where you're like, oh, I'm not playing full out, or I think I've got more to give, or I could serve in a bigger way. It's important to stake a claim to that, because that'll, and then to start to imagine what that could look like. This is where the practice of visualization that I brought up in Uncommon, the future me, is you get a sense from your heart of what that looks like. So I had a sense in my heart that I could do that, right? That 100 million was doable, and it was an important mission. It's why I'm on this planet. I had no clue how, like I said earlier, it would happen. And nor did it matter, right, at that point. But I began to visualize myself as worthy of that. And what I was doing there then, and practicing that visualization every day, creates a memory of a future that the more you practice it, the more it becomes a destiny. Just like hashing your mind over the emotional coals of past trauma creates energy around that trauma, which makes that trauma and its resultant emotional shadow patterns your destiny, right? So it's very important to be extremely judicious with how we use psychological time, right? In terms of our past psychological time, we've got to release energy and not dwell on past traumas, not rake ourselves over the coal constantly. Yes, it's okay to understand it, but then to release it, to surrender, to forgive, so that you don't continue to draw that energy into the future. And then the flip side, as you use your psychological time in a future state, we don't want to be filled with worry or fear or doubt or anxiety or, wondering if the world's going to hell in a handbasket or what's happening, with politics in America and Europe and London. Mm-hmm. You want to have a very strong vision of your future world, because that's the only world you live in, is your world. Sorry, my dog. And so you create that future vision. Yeah, she's like, I agree with you, Mark.
Yes, 100%. Little spirit animal.
Huskies are so intuitive. So you create that vision. The vision comes from your heart. It's not like an ego vision board. It's like that archetypal energy. And then you begin to feel into it. And then you sit with that energy, and eventually imagery will come to you. And it's not the same imagery as like visualization. Visualization is very active energy. It's like, it's like concentration. You have to think it into existence. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about is a type of imagery that comes to you from your heart as like a soft kind of knowingness. And then it starts to take shape. And so that becomes this future vision that you come back to every day. It's part of your ritualistic kind of practice. Mm-hmm. And like I said, every time you visualize something and imagine something, you give it energy. I equate it to like if you took a ball of string and just keep on rolling string around it, right? Eventually you're going to have a ball of string the size of Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. Every time you visualize something, and if it's the same thing, then you're adding a layer of energy to it. And then so you're energizing that vision every day. And soon that vision becomes so concrete and so real that it has like this intense magnetic pull. And you don't even need to have a path to it, because it'll pull you to it. Mm. And all the obstacles that will rise will seem puny.
Yeah.
Right. And so that life flow is this pull of life pulling you toward your destiny when you really lean into it and accept it and begin to remove the mental obstacles that are standing in your way. And trust me, all obstacles are mental obstacles.
The monkey mind.
That's right. Well, the monkey mind, desires, fears, all the constructs, mental constructs of the way things should be versus accepting the way things are. So that's why, your point about getting in the heart is so important, because, courage is of the heart, right? So it takes courage to get into the heart, but then to stay in the heart evokes courageous action, because it is heart. And heart is a seat of wisdom and insight and empathy and compassion, right? And these are the most important human skills or traits or qualities. Whereas what we'll call the mind, or the head mind, really is the predominantly the way it's trained in the West is for reason, analysis, logic, and thinking. And all of that is based upon memory, which is going to be influenced by the conditioning and the big events of your life, and also your identity of who you think you are based upon how others perceive you, how you were named, how you're trained with your institutions and family and whatnot, and culture. So all of that is that the mind then constructs a reality that you project into the world, and then you say that this is the world. But the reality is, like I said a moment ago, it's actually your world. Mm-hmm. There's not one world out there. There's 8 billion worlds, human worlds, and then there's an infinite number of other worlds, of other creatures having their own worldly experience. We mistake it as a common world because there is this pseudo-consensus reality, but even that is constructed. It's shaped. You can see that right now coming. Really, the wrapper has come off in American politics, because now we see that, wow, this reality that we're living has always been shaped through a narrative. And the dominant narrative is, who's in power and control and who's running the media and the consumerism and all that. And if you're glued to your phone and your TV, then you are being trained and shaped and conditioned to believe in this consensus reality, which is all made up. It's a complete fabrication. And in my opinion, it's not really healthy for us. And it's not leading us to the freedom in terms of the spiritual freedom and the total autonomy that all humans ultimately strive for. So the only way to break free of that is through your own spiritual development and to see it all as a mental construct and to get into the heart. This is why I use the word Koro for my my most intense training at SEALFIT, and because it means heart and mind merged into your actions. And also represents the three most profound paths to spiritual enlightenment. The path of the wisdom, which is jnana yoga. The path of the heart or devotion, which is bhakti yoga. And the path of action, which is karma yoga. And so when you combine them all together, heart, mind, action, all in one integrated whole, then you have an accelerated path, an opportunity for accelerated development. And I can only claim this because I've experienced it. Like who I am today is just so radically different. My felt experience, my lived experience, so radically different today than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so you can only, I can only express it as like a quickening, an acceleration.
It's a quantum acceleration.
It's a ball rolling downhill. Then it's picking up steam because it's picking up energy. It's picking up, matter. Mm-hmm. So spiritual development is like that. It can be really slow and lonely, and you feel like you're making no progress. And you can have times where you quit and you stop. And I even describe, those obstacles and some of the reasons why it's so easy to fall off your journey on your path or your practice. But if you just stick with it, suddenly you start to see the fruits of your labor, right? It's like you can't rush, an apple's development on a tree before it ripens and falls, right? It's just got it, it's painful at first for that seed to start to, turn into the tree, and then the tree bears fruit and then drops its fruit. So that's what's happening with you as a human whether you like it or not, right? It's happening, but you can consciously accelerate the journey once you commit to it. I think there's a lot of confusion about that because, in the Buddhist tradition says you are already free. You are already enlightened. You are already the Buddha nature. It's just the ego that's in the way. And so get rid of the ego and then you are already that. And then they also say you don't have to do anything because you're already that. And so some people then, do that immediate spiritual bypass, say, oh, I am already that. I am already God. I am God. But it's the ego that's saying that.
Mm-hmm. I've done the work already. It's always...
So this is where the merging of East and West is so profound because there is a very powerful rationale for developing the ego before you can let it go, which is what Western psychotherapy is all about. That's where the saying, you've got to be somebody before you can be nobody, comes from. Mm-hmm. So this is why I try, in Unbeatable Mind, I've endeavored to combine the East and West in an integrated fashion so that we can simultaneously develop the mind, understand how the reality is constructed by the ego, strengthen our ability to become more consciously aware with our mind, so that it then has the courage and the confidence to be able to take the step of surrendering and letting go. So there's kind of this outward path of like developmental work, and then the inward path of surrender and letting go and acceptance and forgiveness and just removing all of the egoic structures and obstacles to let consciousness, go from a trickle to a flood through your being.
Okay, Mark, we're going to pause right there. We're going to take a quick break. And before we do that, though, is there Is there anything you want to share with listeners? Maybe, your website, anything you want to share?
Well, I will share this. Most Americans, Westerners, are heavily trained and conditioned to focus on their body and on performance and on kind of the outer world, and that's fine. There's no judgment there. And so we have to find a mechanism or a key to be able to turn our attention inward, because this work that we're talking about here is all done on the the inner path. It's in the field of potential, not the field of performance. It's the indwelling, not the outdwelling. And that key is the breath. And so what's cool about the breath is there's a physical and physiological aspect to the breathing. I mean, there's something you're doing. You get to do breathing, right? So it gives you an anchor, like, oh, I can do this. So I do breathing, and we teach box breathing. I introduced box breathing to Navy SEALs in 2006, and it's had a profound effect on them. They're now teaching it in SEAL training. It's funny because people say, yeah, the SEALs use box breathing. I'm like, they did not until I started teaching the SEALs box breathing. And I'm very clear, like, I didn't invent box breathing. That came from pranayama yoga tradition.
Yeah.
But so the breath has a physical kind of actual, very powerful performance advantage to it. And that breath, inhaling to 5 count, hold your breath for 5 count, exhale for 5 count, hold your breath, brings great health benefits. It releases the stress. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It literally down regulates everyone who's in hyperarousal. And that's most of our culture is in a hyperarousal state. And then they're compensating through that, by excess of drinking coffee, alcohol, exercise, workaholism, anything that, is stimulating, which keeps you in that hyperarousal. So it becomes a new norm, and you don't even notice it until you reach burnout.
Yeah.
So box breathing has that physical benefit, but it also has a psychological benefit, because your brain, right, is the experience generator of the mind. And so the box breathing practice begins to calm your mind down by getting your brainwave patterns to down-regulate into that high alpha, low beta state instead of high beta or gamma, which is agitation. And so monkey mind is when you're constantly in a high beta gamma state, and the energy is so erratic and so high paced that they have this constant steady stream of thoughts, and they're all the same thoughts over and over and over. We call those loops. Most of them are fear-based, conditioned loops, So the box breathing has the additional benefit of psychologically calming your mind down, calming your brain down, and you experiencing a lessening of those thoughts. And you're able to remain more calm, right? And then what's cool is the box breathing practice also serves as an attention control and a concentration training, because you're doing something that has a repetitive pattern. So it's just like a concentration practice. And the attention control part is where you deliberately hold your attention on that box pattern. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And the longer you practice, the more you notice that you've lost that attention. You've gotten distracted, and you're able to bring it back and bring it back quicker and quicker, and hold your attention on that box pattern for longer and longer time. So now you've got 3, Tonia, powerful training outcomes just from doing a daily box breathing practice. You have arousal control, which is the physiological. You have attention control, which is the psychological reducing of the number of thoughts and the ability to maintain your concentration. And you have the power of concentration, which is gathering up your mental energy, which has been frittered away on countless default mode network, thinking patterns which weren't serving you. This will naturally, just like, I started Zen training when I was 21, and I didn't have to learn mindfulness. Mindfulness was an outcome of a long period of concentration training. Mm-hmm. Right? What happens is you keep your attention on that box pattern over a long period of time, And because your energy is now focused really, really closely on this one thing, this one pattern, then what happens is you create this metacognitive like separation where now you begin to see and experience the thoughts as if from a distance that do arise. And so then what happens is you take your foot off the gas pedal and stop concentrating so much, but you're still doing the breathing, and it becomes more of a monitoring. And now you're monitoring your thoughts, and you have this profound shift in awareness where suddenly you're like, oh, holy shit, I am not my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think I was those thoughts because my awareness was merged with them. It was simultaneous. And now what's happening is you have this awareness which precedes thought, and it's there during thought, and it's there after thought, and it's there with no thought, which is what the Zen would call mu or no mind, mu shen. So now you have the fourth profound benefit, which is mindfulness or awareness with mindfulness. And this is the gateway to the gateless gate, right? That mindfulness is where you sit with that now for a while, witnessing, watching, and suddenly you'll have this shift of perception into the timeless state. And it'll happen just intermittently at first. And then you just stick with it, be patient, have a loving relationship with this practice. And that timeless presence then begins to, once that aperture is open, it comes through until it's a flood, right? And then it's a permanent thing. And that's what we call awakened awareness, is when awareness of source, life, Satya Ananda, being consciousness bliss, is a permanent fixture. It's at the forefront instead of, an unconscious knowingness. And it doesn't mean you lose anything. You don't lose your identity. You're just not convinced by it anymore. Right. Anyways, so all of that, to answer your question, accrues from the most simplest practices, right? Like this is another point that I've learned, especially as a warrior. It's like, if it's not simple, it's probably not true. The simplicity is not easy, like Steve Jobs said, but the simplest practices tend to be the most profound. You just got to stick with it.
Right? And it's something we all have access to, but it's how we yield it.
That's right. Like if someone's listening to this and they do nothing else, they don't spend a dime on anything else, any program, they don't have any teachers, because Sadhguru is your teacher. That's your inner guru. Ultimately, life is your guru. So your life is your koan, your practice, and your guru. If you just do this practice that I'm describing for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, and you do it with great earnestness, great attentiveness, great love, and you believe my words, that's all you need, really, ultimately. It'll lead you where you need to go. The breath is the bridge between the body, the mind, and the spirit, but you have to go through. I would even say the breath is the bridge between the body, mind, heart, and spirit, but the qualifier is the spirit's in the heart, right? The spirit resides in the heart, or the light of the spirit kind of projects through the heart center. That's the center of our being. So that's the practice. Start there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that, because it reminded me of when I realized how impactful that practice that I learned from you was on my journey. And it was, I was practicing it, was doing the work, and I was still, kind of in the corporate, I was still wearing the corporate hat. And I remember sitting at my desk one morning very early, and I got a nasty email from a client, which happened all the time. That's kind of the energy they would bring forward. And that's just a practice for you. Absolutely. And so here's the magic, though, that happened in that moment is, instead of just feeling so much discomfort here, I noticed, and I'm not sure when this, if I'd been doing this before, but I noticed my body, in my body, I automatically started box breathing. And I immediately, I was flowing. So I was replying in a loving and kind way. I was not triggered by, the words that he used in his state of being. I was just showing up, and I was able to with kindness and compassion, because no matter what, like, we're all humans and we're all operating, like you said, like from our own worlds, and how our worlds are shaped really because we're all one. Our worlds affect one another. And so even just me being able to, with love and compassion and kindness, respond to him, even though I literally wanted to give him my 2 middle fingers, I didn't, because I used that, I allowed myself to, that practice really brought me into right in that moment. And I didn't take it free of attachment.
That's right. That's pretty profound. Thanks for sharing that. We live in a reflective world. It's like a hologram. And so even though there's not one world, but 8 billion worlds, and your world is your world. Mm-hmm. And there's another perceived individual who has their world, but we're both, let's say you and I, we're both points of consciousness. Like if you imagine a star being a point of light, we are like stars. We're a point of light, point of consciousness, but the conscious is universal. This consciousness that is looking through your eyes is the same that is looking through my eyes. Mm-hmm. But it's operating through the brain and the body and the heart of an individual that has got a very unique, different set of circumstances. So it's going to perceive slightly different. So it's a different perspective, right? So imagine this, every being has a unique perspective, not just from the way they're looking at the world out those eyes, but because of all the conditioning, both karmic as well as all the conditioning of this lifetime. Having said that, it's simply the same consciousness, perceiving things differently. So and it's a reflective universe, like I said. So if your consciousness becomes awake and aware of itself, then it's like, oh my gosh, right? Everybody I see, every human, every being, ultimately everything is the same as I. Mm-hmm. Why would I not love it? Because it's like, I love myself, which is why self-love is actually the most important place to start. Self-forgiveness and self-love, because if you're not loving yourself, then you can't love others. And if you don't love others, then you're going to get that reflected back at you. So compassion, acceptance, forgiveness, and love should be our default. We put that out into the world, and then other consciousness will receive that and recognize that and reflect it back to you. So the simplest, version of this is, if you're full of fear, the world's going to be a fearful place.
Yes.
If you're full of scarcity, the world's going to be a scarce place. If you're full of anger, the world's going to be an angry place. But if you're full of love and compassion and forgiveness and joy, guess what? That's what your world is. That's why I thought 100 million, 100 million souls who share what we're talking about, who who believe that we are all the same, having a unique individual experience. So we rejoice in the sameness and applaud the uniqueness instead of pointing out the separateness, which is what's going on in our world.
Yeah.
And leading with an open heart and open hands instead of a closed fist and a closed heart. And projecting love and compassion and forgiveness. Can you imagine, like, literally the idea of heaven on earth is very possible. We can literally create a new earth. And the power of, like, back to David Hawkins' work, the power of, universal love is profoundly more powerful than jealousy, greed, anger, all the isms, which are, at the lower end of the conscious scale. So one person vibrating at 600, which is enlightenment, or 560, which is universal love, has the power, of like 10,000 people who are vibrating down below 200.
Oh,
and
I
I'm just
love
making
that.
that number up, but it's like, so can you imagine 100 million people at the level of universal love? And it's going to happen, right? We may
Yes.
even be there. And it takes a little bit of time for the outer world to catch up, right? Because there's we're talking thousands of years of negativity and fear and control mechanisms at work. And they're all like rushing toward a cliff because they sense that the end is near, I think. Right. That's my story anyways. This is why it's getting really chaotic and seemingly like, holy shit.
Revelations.
Yeah. Well, the other end of that, right, that's just the old breaking down. So just don't feed into that energy. Don't feed into it with fear. Don't fight it. Turn your back on it and just bring more and more love and light in the world.
That is, yes. Yes, Mark. Yes to all of it.
Right. Why not? Right. It seems so simple, but simple is not easy. Like I said earlier, it takes work because the conditioning, the entropy, the force, working against us is pretty strong, right there. This is like, I was thinking about this the other day. This is a stupid example, and I don't want to talk politics, but wishing that anyone would get murdered or assassinated is not positive. Can we agree on that? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And I have a very good friend. I was like, I can't believe they tried to kill Trump. Like, it's stunning how it's all coming out in the open, thinking that I was talking to kind of a peer.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, let's hope they succeed next time.
Yeah.
I just had to smile. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay.
That's where it's like you say, like, I love you, and let's have a conversation on how this isn't the way to lead with loving compassion.
I know. I was like, this wasn't the time for me to have that conversation with him. But that's not a very loving thing to say. I don't care what you think about an individial. But we don't.
Can I share something with you? I know, and I have, I stopped listening to really news about 4.5 years ago, and it really changed my life. Because, and I also, this is funny. I'm really careful about how I take in content, even from like podcasts, especially now that I'm kind of in this place, because I don't want to get it out of alignment from where I am meant to be. I don't want to see what's going on. It doesn't matter because
your head isn't in the sand. You're actually tapping into more truth. So,
exactly, because it's true. Instead of it, like you were saying earlier, the getting, diluting it, maybe, like you said, you're the vessel, you're bringing this in through uncommon, through all of the beautiful work you brought into this space and time. And then, it's almost like, I see it as like it's kind of an honor that people, kind of in this 3D space feel inclined to use that. And it's, again, free from attachment because it's fine. However, for me, like where I am at, I feel so strongly in that same place of like, I just want to be the vessel and I do not want to have that influence. And so I'm going to say something around politics because everything, and I love that you brought it up, because why can't we have loving conversations about it, right? And like when I think of anyone that's in politics and where that is, like for me, having Trump as a president once before, what he did for us as a society is he unearthed something that has been buried for a very long time.
Definitely.
And so for me,
service, whether he ever gets back in office or not, it's a great service.
Yes. And so it's I say thank you for showing us all that was there.
Definitely.
And
because it was well hidden.
It was so hidden.
Now it's like a boil that bursts. And now we're like, oh, wow, who is actually in charge here?
Exactly. So, and what does that do? It brings it to our awareness.
That's right. And then you can navigate that. with grace.
Yeah,
Don't fight.
exactly.
I'm so glad you said that, because where I was going to go with that is like this guy who I love very much that I was talking to, he watches TV every day, right? Even if you watch sports, I don't have any problem with people watching sports or the Olympics and stuff, but you just have to know that you're being conditioned with all the commercials. Yeah. And he also watches network news, CNN, NBC, CBS, and that is all conditioning. It's all propaganda. And so if you're plugged into this stuff day and night, you are being trained and conditioned to be a certain way. And so part of that is to look at the other side as demons or as threats to democracy or as like Hillary, deplorables, right? Or whatever. And that's awful, because you're talking about almost half the country.
Yeah.
That this mechanism that you just talked about, that is now being presented as the behind the scenes, who's really running the show, controlling the media and the corporate state that's running things. That is really incredible, the power, and they understand psychology extremely well. And they've been doing this for a very long time. And so if you're plugged in and you haven't, developed the self-awareness to realize that your mind has been hacked and programmed, then it's going to be, that's actually suffering, right? Because you are taking that dream to be real. And that's what Buddha said. Maya is dukkha. Like, so that the illusion is suffering. And you're buying into an illusion. So I haven't watched TV in over 30 years, like real TV.
What?
In fact, I'm not kidding.
I love that.
When I go, when I travel, every once in a while I'll be waiting for a plane and I'll look up and I'll watch like the talking heads, and everything's moving so fast, and I immediately see right through all the bullshit. Like I can see, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. And then I see everyone else is just glued to it and sucking it up as if it's truth. I'm like, oh, wow. So I haven't watched, I don't watch news just like you. I get my information through meditation primarily. And then there's a certain group of, futurists and analysts and geopoliticists and others that I will consume some of their content. And even then I have a light, touch with it. Right.
Yeah.
Because everything's, from the perspective of that individual. And that was hammered home. I'm finishing up my PhD in global leadership and change. And 4 years in academia, I can tell you that the whole thing is just built on a house of cards, right? Because because from a spiritual perspective, there is no way that any investigation of any kind isn't biased, because of the observer principle, right? You are consciousness observing something, and as soon as you observe it, you change the behavior of what you observe. So, and there's so much corruption in academia and medical community research, like, the whole pharmacological thing around vaccines was a great example. Like, that was all corrupt. And so you just have to recognize all of that. Like, the edifice that this whole culture is built upon has, it's being exposed to more and more people, but it's very clear to me, and probably to you, that it's designed to keep people unhealthy and trapped in debt, and to be good little workers. And in any other culture, they would call that slavery.
Yeah. Yes.
You just have this perception that you're free, but you're not.
I have used that before to describe it. I haven't on this particular show, but when I'm having conversations, so it completely is. Yeah. You're a slave to the systems, right? And you become a slave to your own suffering. Again, going back to
right. And the only way out of suffering is through self-awareness, starting with with your own true nature. So back to the practice. So to investigate your own true nature, you need to slow down, and you need to and you need to find silence on the outside, right? Time for silence every day, in nature, in meditation, contemplation, just sitting, doing nothing, or gardening, right? Put down the phone, turn off the TV, and just find the silence and box breathe. And that will lead to stillness on the inside. So silence is the externalization of stillness on the inside. So we start with the silence, and then we find the stillness. It's impossible to start with the stillness to find the silence because we are outward focused. That's the way our brain works. And stillness is a cessation of psychological time.
Mm-hmm.
And we could call that presence. And in presence, reality is revealed to you. And in that reality, you see that everything is okay. Even what's going on in our country, even, it is just the collective negative, long tail of negative consciousness being played out. But it doesn't.
It's part of the healing, right?
It's part of the healing. Right.
Yeah.
You need to, it's like, you got to, flush that out of the system, just like you do a fever. And it's going to flush out of the system. Don't get sucked into it with fear. Don't fight it as a justice warrior. Like, justice warriors with anger in their heart do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
It's much better to be the change you need to see in the world inside, just like Gandhi said.
Mm-hmm.
Be the change in your world, and then let your world affect other people's worlds. And we can only do that by finding that stillness inside. Punjab said, sitting in stillness is the most important thing. Don't waste time not doing it.
Which is funny because when I first started working with Unbeatable Mind, having a coach, I remember being asked to sit for 30 seconds. And I can't even tell you without doing anything. I can't use the words that came up in my mind around, you've got to be kidding me. So I started with 5 seconds, and I worked my way up. And then I will share, you don't know this, but I ended up I got really sick last year and I ended up having surgery in February. I had a tumor.
Oh, sorry. Oh my.
No, it was a gift, right? I mean, it's a gift because in that time, I was doing so much inner work. I was spending so much time, just really, it's like I've been training for this my whole life. And it was naturally a tumor on my adrenal gland, yes.
That makes sense because
it totally makes sense. Yeah.
All diseases, including cancer, are ultimately a manifestation of mental disharmony.
Yeah.
Just take a while to show up. It's hard for a lot of people to accept that. I mean, that's why miracles happen, is because if you have radical acceptance, you can have instantaneous healing. It may be rare, but some people who are desperate or, this is where pain and suffering can be such you're this close. You're like a hair away from enlightenment when you're in extreme suffering. So don't waste the opportunity. And you didn't, it sounds like.
It felt, I was cracking jokes going into surgery because I had spent, hours in this place of just meditation and reflection and contemplation, just about how full my life has been up until this point. And knowing that if I didn't, take a breath afterwards, that I was complete, that this was complete. And so everything from here on out is a gift. And that's where, like you mentioned, like that state of bliss, like I feel like it has allowed me to remember that every moment is a gift. And we have this, whether we choose to live that way or not. And going back to what you said, I think that it all starts with the breath.
Mm-hmm.
It starts, it's that training of coming back home to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Suzuki said that the mind is just a swinging door. You breathe in, it swings one way. You breathe out, it swings another. And what he's talking about really is it's an admonition to watch the breath, because as you inhale, you're inhaling life force. Mm-hmm. You're inhaling consciousness. And you have an opportunity to swing the door open to witness, to have a momentary death of the ego. And then you exhale. And of course, we're in action, we're doing things. This is not like city practice. This is like up and down, and doing things, even in the middle of a workout, right? Like, How can Mark Divine be smiling and be peaceful while he's doing snatches and everyone else is struggling? It's because Inhale comes consciousness, life force. Exhale goes the ego. This moment is all I have. This one thing is all I need to focus on. And then the next breath, I'll worry about the next breath. And then what happens is your mind gets trained to stay on that breath and to keep the door open. So it never swings shut eventually, right? And so that's a permanent state of presence while you're in the midst of action. Again, that's what Wei Wu Wei actually means. Action without the actor being the ego, the identity. The identity that Mark is doing this and Mark is doing that. Well, Mark is just an accretion of ideas and conditioning concepts. No different than like the idea of California and the idea of money are just concepts. We take it to be so real, but it's just a mental concept. It's just something mind-made fantasy. And so your identity is a mind-made fantasy. The reality of who you are, the thread that threads throughout your existence is the I, the sense of I, which is non-personal consciousness. And we take it personally. We take ownership of it. It's said that the awareness of thoughts actually occurs 1/10,000th of a second after the thought happens to us. And so then we have the perception that we had that thought, or we created that thought, or that thought was ours, and the ego takes ownership of it, but it's already in memory. So that all thinking is actually from a past state memory projected into the future, designed to keep us from the present, at least in the mind-created reality of this matrix that we live in. So coming back constantly to the breath and opening that door, letting it swing open and keeping it open to allow the mind to stay in that present moment and not slip into memory, project into future. That's the practice. And ultimately, we've got to take it off the mat or off the bench or off the chair, wherever you do your morning box breathing or meditation, right? It becomes a moment to moment to moment thing. And that's where freedom is found, right? Freedom from desire, fear, suffering.
Well, Mark, this has been amazing.
That's a fun conversation.
Yeah. I know I only have probably a minute left or so. And I just want to say truly thank you for, like you said, it's the being present here and now, allowing to be in a state of flow, so that our two worlds
we co-created some.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure our guides are just like, oh yeah.
Exactly. Well, it felt really good, and I really appreciate you for doing this and for being who you are and committing to the work and for sharing your insights and wisdom with the world. It's really important.
I thank you. However, I felt that pull to walk into your gym one day, back when you still had the physical gym. And I think that was my soul brought me there for a reason. And it's like, that warrior spirit. And it's funny because maybe that's something, maybe in the future it'll be a different conversation, but it's like you have this, you were a Navy SEAL commander, and that takes such a, people think of it as maybe a physical, but it goes back to like, there's so much to that. And it's the gentleness, and it's the connection with the emotions. It's the relationship with the ego. It's so much more than that. And it's knowing who you are and how you are connected to something greater than yourself. And so I thank you for everything you've put out into the world and every single person that you have really touched in this journey. And I just want to add this last thing. for anyone that is listening and, really looking for maybe a way to get unstuck or to have a way, I will just say Mark's work for me has been pivotal in my growth. And, I think a lot of what I love about your work is that, you weave in your own personal experiences, you weave in a lot of like the ancient wisdoms, and it's a playbook. So it's like you have these tools that are baked in. So it's like you said, it's like you can be your own guru, and you can use like these steps to help you kind of get over those mountains.
Right. Yeah.
So
Hoo-yah.
Thank you, Mark. Hoo-yah. Yeah. Until next time. And thank you, listeners. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Alchemy of Me, where we navigate the anatomy of humanity through the lens of science and spirituality. For more mind, body, energy, medicine concepts, tools, and practices to nourish the seeds, the light, the fire, that gold of intelligence that is you, tune in every first and third Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com. For more information about me and my work, please visit toniajohnson.com. That's toniajohnson.com.